Hi everyone. So I feel like this is going to be more of like a meditation about the games industry, games and ethics or philosophy and what we're going to call as ethics. But we'll come back to what I think about that in a sec. So who am I? I make games and make people play them. I mean, they play it themselves. I don't make anyone play. It's fine. I have taught coding, technology, design, UX, all sorts of things in my time. I like to talk about ethics. BrizTech, do you remember BrizTech? Is that still going? Don't think so. And I have a podcast called the Machine Ethics Podcast, and we talk about AI and ethics, and I talk to interesting people, and it's not just about me, it's about them, so check it out. It's not just me talking at you for an hour. But what I wanted to kind of bring today was, it's interesting how we can make games and that there are things which we should be reflecting on as we do that. And part of that is the kind of the creation of games, and Carter spoke a bit about that. And we can talk about the business of games and labour practices, wages, who shares in when a game does well, for example, the fruits of our labour I've put there. What happens with equality issues when you have big games like CD Projekt Red has a thing which the audience think is subpar or is just broken. And you have other players like publishers. And then we start getting into the weeds where in the industry, we are starting to think more passionately about the environment and production and how these things affect us. And you get things like Call of Duty being like 80 gig to download, and internet providers having to phone up Activision and go, guys, when you release your next game, can you tell us? Because you're like ruining the internet for us, okay? So there are actual issues with some of this stuff. So I'm not going to go through the whole list, but this is a non-exhaustive list of the things that I found, read about, are interested in, think are interesting, and I'm going to talk about some of them in a second. So I'm just going to give you a quick sec just to peruse. But there will also be a video afterwards, so that'd be good. So, what is ethics? I like to throw this out to the audience because it's always amusing to me what people think ethics is. What is ethics, everyone? Has anyone going to stick their hand up and tell me what it is?
Application of values.
Application of values, yeah. So there's values in there, and there's doing stuff. Yeah? That's what I'm hearing anyway. I'm interpreting your words. Anyone else?
It's fair.
Pardon?
It's fair.
Fair? Or what is fair? Yeah? Making an assumption about what is fair, or deliberating about what is fairness. So I'm gonna kind of take some of those points, and I'm gonna say that ethics for me is the kind of moral philosophy branch of philosophy that involves systematizing and defending and recommending concepts of right and wrong conduct. And for me, it's kind of like, this is like the important bit, right? We can make as many decisions as we like, but unless we do something, it doesn't matter, right? You can keep everything up here, but if you're not going to do something, enact things in the world, systematize, make frameworks, impact on someone else's liberties, do something, walk down the street, then you're not really doing ethics, in my opinion. So we get questions like this, like, what is the right thing to do? And these are the kind of things that you start discovering about ethics. What systems of frameworks should we make? What ought to be created? And we can talk about creative works and industry. What should we be doing with ourselves? What behavior is and isn't permissible or desirable? And at the end of the day, this sounds like stuff kind of relevant to games. Like, what does a good life look like, and what kinds of world are we creating? So in ethics, we're always kind of striving to make something in one direction instead of another direction. Given all possibility space, what should we be doing, right? Which direction should we be going down? How do we know whether we made that decision is the correct decision? And with games, we're also kind of making worlds, right? So I'm going to make this terrible analogy between games and ethics now, okay? So bear with me. There's this duality that I'm going to press upon you, which I'm going to call world building. And if you are into games, world building is a term which is used quite a lot, thrown around to do with making stories and mechanics around a game. So we can talk about ethics in the way that we're trying to describe a world that we want to live in. But we're also doing that in games. We're also describing worlds and showing, and the worlds that we are making say something about the world, as they do with any creative project, fine art, music, theatre, etc. And if we're going to use some terminology within philosophy, let's universalize some of the stuff we looked at before. We don't want this stuff, right? We're probably choosing not to do these things. That's my hope, right? If you're going away today and going, ooh, I could pay them less, and I could make them work longer, and I could, you know what I mean? I'm hoping that's not what we're doing here, right? And sometimes, this is not black and white, and we do get pressed into a corner, and the market demands certain things, or social etiquette demands certain things, or tradition demands certain things, and those things muddy the circumstance. But what I'm saying is that we're not striving for this stuff, right? That's not the world we're trying to make, probably, unless you are some sort of maniac, which there are in the world. So I think the last one is kind of the most, I want to say, I'm trying to find the right word, but this is dangerous, right? Because it pertains to the stuff about AI, which we'll come back to a bit later, but also just designing technology generally. We've seen a lot of this with Cambridge Analytica and things like that, where we've shown that loads of data, we can prod people to do things in certain ways if they are using their technology, and we can kind of like show them stuff, right? It's like, go on YouTube, I'll show you stuff. Stick around, guys. I will show you some stuff, and maybe that aligns with my beliefs more than this other person over here, right? Maybe this other political party, for example. So the good, the bad, and the exploitative. So I like this. Does anyone remember what this is from? Enron. Yeah, Enron. Yeah, it's also in Mr. Robot as well, TV show. But I am unapologetically capitalism. I'm against capitalism. And this, I had to put in only earlier, but I really do believe strongly that if you are optimizing for profit, then we're all buggered, right? We're not here to get exploited, is my point. And with technology, we have the ability to nudge people, like we were discussing, but also with games, things like that, we can show people some things, we can show people experiences, we can talk about certain things over other things, we can show people in a certain light instead of other lights. So we can do things to people with technology. But technology, and games specifically, is also a creative product. And this duality coming back in. That's what I'm hoping. This is a thread that I'm trying to weave here. Did anyone see this at all? The V&A exhibition back in, it's actually 2008 now, which is quite a while ago. Not 8, sorry, 18. They had a whole bit on kind of like how games can show the other side of political intrigue and stuff like that, and be political mediums. So we can use these ideas that we were looking at before, and we can actually critique them in games. And we can use those things to shed light on what is going on in the world, or we can use them to show kind of people that won't necessarily be interested in those things exist, that there are things to know about, or that they can do things about it. So part of that was in this exhibition, they had a whole thing about guns and sexual exploitation and material exploitation technology. And one of those games was, I think it was called Mobile Phone Tycoon. I couldn't actually find it on the internet earlier. But you had to play loads of mini games to create a iPhone. And one of those mini games was like mining in, the Congo and stuff, and like being in a factory in China, and people were like throwing themselves off the roof and stuff. Like, it's really dark, but it gets you to reflect on those things that you might not see, right? And they were all things which are documented. It wasn't like it was some sort of fictional thing. Has anyone read the book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow? Yeah? Of course you have. It's a good book, and it's about games, but it's mostly about a relationship with two people who make games. It's just in that world. But one of the games that kicks off that book is around this commentary about the greyness of an ethical quandary when you're working in a factory and you're making these things, and then later on in the game you find out that actually you're making arms for Hitler or something. And then the only thing that you could do to win the game is actually stop making the things, stop playing the game, essentially. So it's like these social commentaries that you can put into people's hands, get them to play. And it becomes more visceral that way. So some of you might have an idea of these kinds of games, and some of them might be this. You might have a different list. These are the ones that I keep coming up every time I Google it, again and again and again. I would suggest that I don't play enough of these games to actually have a longer list. So if you've got any recommendations, let me know. I'm really interested, so do let me know. But this comes back to the kinds of games we're making. And what I'm saying is not every game has to be like a social commentary, a meditation. It doesn't, right? I'm just pulling out the fact that at the extreme end, you have games like this, right, who make it their focus to show you something about the world, to make you, like in Nier, most of the time, they're just like having a misunderstanding. You're killing loads of people, and you find out later that you're the bad guy, or whatever. Or you're doing something which is abhorrent. So you don't have to make games like that. But coming back to world building, every game can help move that direction, right? You're literally going to talk to someone in their own home. And what you're telling them is creating worlds for them in their brain, but for the rest of us as well. Same as other creative works. But I just wanted to like pull that apart. Okay, so do read the book, it's good. But aside from my world building, what else is going on? There are things like VR. Does anyone do VR? No. I like to say that I was doing VR, if one can do VR. But there are interesting things about VR, which we haven't quite kind of broached properly yet. And I think we've kind of got over this idea that the safety aspect, so that this VR sickness, right? If you've tried a VR headset, probably I'm going to say 10 years ago now, maybe, the first kind of ones, they were like nauseating. But now they're much better. The technology is caught up. But there's always interesting stuff when you are put into a a digital space where you get to move around, and there's other people moving around, and you have this kind of strange situation where, like you're playing a multiplayer game and there's someone kind of shouting down the thing at you. Now people are literally up in your face doing that, right? And they can be crowds of people doing that to you. And you're kind of like in this world, like not physically, it's hard to have the right words, but like it takes a step to get out of that situation. So there's an interesting boundary that's kind of been worked out with what we can do in those social spaces in VR. And that's happening right now. Toxic behavior, bullying, and a similar thing to what we were talking about before. And also it asks the question again, which is kind of this ethical kind of world that we live in, is like, what is self-expression? You know, what is permissible? What can we do? What are we allowing people to see? You know, what should our kids be exposed to? What shouldn't they? What should we as adults, like, you know, people who don't need to get teabagged every day, like, be exposed to? And coming back to kind of the implementation, the game design aspect, what kinds of things are we allowing people to do in our games? What capabilities are we inputting? You know, I didn't stress this very much earlier, but like if you were making homogeneous games about shooting, then games become this thing about shooting people. Fortunately, we see a lot of things which are not that now. But to many people in the world, computer games are about shooting people, right? So it wouldn't be Tech Ethics Bristol, apparently, if we didn't do something on AI. So I've got a 10-cent bit about games ethics and AI. This is a problem. So I was using Midjourney earlier to put together a female game player. And it's pretty good. But we have a problem within AI of bias, representation, all this sort of stuff. And that is well documented. So if you put in loads of different stuff like, are they a doctor? And the thing will come back and say, he is a doctor. And it's like all this kind of bias that are in text and imagery that we have scraped off the internet for many years, reappearing for us in these models. So we get lots of sexualized imagery, and we get lots of kind of gender-biased text back. We are trying to do something about that as a industry, but it's still something to be mindful of. We have unintended consequences and outcomes. I don't know if anyone remembered AI Dungeon a few years ago. Check it out. It feels really old now, because like it's come so far. But when GPT-3 came out, a student in America, I think, took it and went, we can make Dungeons and Dragons, but like generative. And they made this thing called AI Dungeon, and you can basically text, do a chat message to the AI, and it would start going on this journey with you, start telling you a story about what's going on, but you could type things in like, I'm a adventurer and I'm after a dragon, and you press enter and it go, great, you just got to a cave and the dragon's inside the cave and it's got loads of treasure, and you carry on this, and it was at times just glorious, right? But what we found is that we could also just text anything. So we could go on these lovely journeys with, trying to say it's a good word in a way which is not like too abhorrent, but like, you could put in some really nasty stuff, let's say, and it would just carry on, you know, and be like, great, this is happening to the story, and I'm going to like make that happen to your character, and that's fine. So we got into the sticky situations, or they did, about what is allowed in that space. You know, what stories are we allowed to tell with that technology? And sometimes it can go too far the other way. And actually, we had loads of people who were, I wasn't part of this, but there were lots of players who were paying for this thing, who were annoyed that actually they got this thing taken away from them, and they couldn't say certain things anymore, and they couldn't go on these certain kind of stories anymore. So we got this kind of weird kind of backlash where they went too far the other way, maybe. So that's an interesting thing that's happening there about like what is allowed in your, you know, what is kind of offensive or not, basically, personally. Automated manipulation is another good one. This is the world we're going to live in. You know, we can have personalized pricing is already a bad thing, which we can see everywhere, especially if you're going for flights or holidays. But we can do that with UI, right? We can do that with placement. We can do that with advertising. We can do that, all sorts of things. So you start getting to the thing where we talked about moderation earlier. You don't know what anyone else is hearing on the other end. You don't know if they've spoken because you don't actually know what's coming through your end is accurate, right? So that's just an interesting point to make. I'm saying interesting at the end. I'm just telling you it's interesting. It might not be interesting, I'm sorry. And then there's issues, training data, and the IP of the thing that is produced is interesting. And we've talked a lot about like taking people's data, but it's like, you produce this thing, is that copyrightable now? Carter's shaking his head. Good. But it's your jobs that we're all worried about, right? Or the industry is. So we're all worried about our jobs. And you should be worried because Doom. Have you played Doom? Anyone played Doom? Yes. Back in the 90s. Yes. Okay, so this, has anyone seen this before? Yeah, generative Doom, or Game Gen I? They gave it a silly name. Game engine, AI engine. But what is happening here is that a model played Doom, and another model learnt from what it saw what Doom should look like. Taking away the first model, you could now play, give input to the second model, and the second model will produce Doom imagery. So now Doom, the code for Doom doesn't exist anywhere in this system, but the model knows about what should Doomy things look like. And you can play Doom without having scripted it. And my thesis I'm going to leave you with is, this is the future of software. Good night. Any questions?
Yeah.
There is pizza.
I mean,
yeah.
you've been obviously thinking about gaming and ethics quite a while, and there were a load of debunked studies looking at people playing shooting games,
Yep.
going and shooting people, and I think it's kind
Yep.
of common knowledge that something that makes people go and shoot people. But where do you think the line of acceptability is about how twisted a game could be, and then actually have an impact on someone's behaviour after it? That's kind of if you've been thinking about this, it'd be good to get your take on that.
I need a clinical psychologist, right? My gut reaction is that if you're predisposed to a certain reaction to something, whether it's games or movies or books, or whatever it is, then that is going to influence you. I don't think, like you said, there's enough evidence to say that one-to-one, like if I play loads of shooting games and someone else plays loads of shooting games, you know what I mean? There's not really correlation there, which is strong enough to say that this is really bad. But it does come down to kind of like, are you old enough to know the difference? Or have you been exposed to enough things to be able to differentiate? And we have the same problem in kind of digital world generally. Like my kids, they can't use digital things because of the adverts, right? Like most of the time I find them playing the adverts because the thing has shown them, so we're kind of stuck in this system where we're making things which are kind of unusable because of the commercial aspects of it. So I'm more worried about undermining people's agency that way rather than the kind of stuff that we show at the moment. But I mean, they're both issues, basically. Yeah.
What you were saying reminds me of mobile games. So some mobile games, say you're building a farm or something, right?
Yeah.
In the early stages, it happens really fast. And
Yeah.
then it says, it's going to take a week to build this building. How much? You pay money.
Yeah.
So the ethics of targeting games towards people who have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Much time. Is that ethical?
I don't know. Do you think it's ethical?
Depends if short-term shareholder profits is my number one value, then it is.
Yeah, I mean, if it's creating financial success at the return, then it's working, right? And someone's paying. So whether it's good for them to pay or not is the question. Is that thing, getting in the way of their enjoyment? The market would say they're paying, so they want it. They want the thing that's happening to them. If what we need to spend more time thinking about is kind of like psychologically, or just societally, do we want people to be doing this thing? And, is that action like going to be beneficial for anyone? And the thing with my kids and adverts, I would say probably no. But when they're grown adults, maybe I have to make a different decision about that, right? Because they are going to have more autonomy about what they're doing, how they're spending, that sort of things. So it becomes more of a freedom of, not speech, but it's an autonomous adult sort of situation, and what rights you have over your own, being in the world. But I would suggest that the games are amazing, and those things are getting in the way of what games could be, actually, unfortunately. But that's kind of like quite hoity-toity, I guess. Yeah. Richard?
Just to pick up on that, the research that I've seen from psychologists working on gambling in games shows that there are correlations between people who have tendencies towards gambling and those that gamble in games.
Yeah.
When connecting to Carter's talk, that is actually illegal, but is still being done. So that team having microtransactions and a black market sort of in itself that is legal but is not being banned and is supporting those practices. That's really interesting. It's when it's both legal and unethical and it's still there.
Yeah.
Loot boxes, for example.
Yeah.
The EU's getting rid of loot boxes because that's literally gambling.
Yeah, but the EU can't get rid of it everywhere. Yeah. And so it becomes a kind of thing for individual states to try or collections to try and work out what you do with this stateless situation.
Yeah, exactly. Did you have something to add to sorry, there's another question at the back.
Sorry, I'm actually going to throw in another question. So.
Oh, right, yeah. I think, so the gambling thing is really interesting, and probably about 4 years ago, I think the Netherlands just banned loot boxes. I think they were the first ones to go, no, this is not okay. I'm not sure how many other states and like EU states have banned it, but it's that thing again. It's like, the intention for me is important. Like, are you making a game to slowly eke out people's, money, financial rewards for them, and are you instrumentally using them? So, are you creating a product because you think that this is going to be a interesting, fun experience? You're saying something about the world, maybe you have this new interesting mechanic, or are you a business that's only doing it for profit and there's actually no reason to exist otherwise? And I think as a business, you should be interested in reflecting on that situation, right? If you're making anything like that, you should not exist. Again, I'm looking at you. Sorry.
I'd be interested to hear your perspective as somebody who's thought about this sort of interaction with gaming and ethics for so long. Why it is that gaming in particular is so, or rather why ethics is so relevant to gaming in particular as sort of an art form. And as a sort of follow-up, what's the one thing that worries you most about the direction of the industry from an ethical point of view, and how could we target that and counteract it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting in the next couple of years, because there's big players like Apple and Netflix who are just going, actually, the whole mobile thing is bad and we need to do something about that, and we want people to pay. And subscriptions, how are we going to get people to pay? Cool, not adverts. And they're making big strides in that world. And I think it's kind of changing the game a little bit from what it's been like. I think games is also very young as an industry, and a creative thing. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert in ethics and games. I have an interest in both. I would say probably more of an expert in AI and ethics. But the kind of AI intersection is going to be really interesting going forward, because it just it keeps getting more powerful and blending with more and more industries. And like I was saying, I think the whole software industry should be scared about this new progress, because if I want to elaborate, this computer, right, we are only asking it to do stuff, right? And if it comes to a time where it shows us what we want it to show us, and we ask it things, It doesn't matter if it's AI or anything else, or software that we've written ourselves. If it does the thing we want it to do, all software will be AI, and we won't write software anymore. And I think that's the big thing that's going to come in. And I I feel like I need to be on a bigger stage for this to frighten many more people. But that's my thesis for where we're going. And I don't know if that's good or bad, actually. The job thing is real, but I don't know technologically if that is good or bad. It's going to be interesting progress. It might be that we decide as humanity, which we can do because we're all human and we've done it before, we have nuclear weapons and GM crops, we can just decide to stop. So, it's not inevitable. Don't believe in determinism. Things can change and we can decide to do different things. Yeah.
Do you think there should be bigger restrictions on kids playing games? Because I've seen, in the past, my younger brother and I've got a son who's 5 years old, and I've let them try games before, and the behaviours are just absolutely out of this world. So we just cut it completely.
Yeah.
There's something about their brain development and these games that doesn't quite work out.
Yeah. I mean, again, you need a child development person who could talk to that brain development process. But I found the same with my 5-year-old. But now that he's a bit older, actually that little bit more development has actually made a massive difference. And he can cope now with having, set times and set limits and things like that, which he was less able to do when he was younger. So it might be part of the development stages that they're at. That's being a layman in this area. But yeah, I think it is a problem, but my style of parenting is basically it's a problem if they don't get to see lots of different things. So because I'm in games, it's like I can't not let him play games. But as long as he plays different games and is also reading and can go outside, then we're all great, basically. Because the other flip side of it is no games, and I also don't agree with that because you're setting people up for a world where everyone looks at their phone and goes on computers and plays games and all this sort of stuff. So you actually, it's kind of a weird, stance to take where I can sit and play my mobile, but you can't. Or I can play my Switch when you go to bed, you can't. It seems like counterintuitive, especially if you're a kid and you're seeing this stuff everywhere. Yeah. Cool.